Now, as you may know if you've seen any of my previous videos, or as you may be able to guess from my name, Luke Skywalker has always been and always will be my favorite Star Wars character. And for me, one of the biggest questions surrounding the sequel trilogy is, will Luke live through it? And if he doesn't, how and when will he die? First off though, if you'd asked me those questions before the unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher, I would have said that I'm almost positive Luke will die in this trilogy, and that Leia would be the only one to survive it from the big three, those of course being Han, Luke, and Leia. And that's because I just don't see them killing off all three of them in this one trilogy. And I don't know why I feel that way exactly, other than the fact it feels somehow a little sad and disappointing that we'd have to watch all three of them die in this one trilogy. And I thought the obvious choice to survive would have been Leia, considering I think we all knew Han was going to die in The Force Awakens, mainly because Harrison Ford wasn't about to do a whole trilogy's worth of movies, and Luke's death could have, and maybe still will be, used in some very dramatic way to alter the destiny of one of our main characters. And I'm not saying Leia's death couldn't have been, or maybe still will be, used in some very dramatic fashion as well. But with Luke being our elder Jedi in this story, it's likely his death will be used to motivate the next generation of Jedi. But this also brings up another interesting question. Will Leia die in this trilogy? Because I've just kind of been assuming she will, considering of course Carrie Fisher has passed away. But does she perhaps survive? Maybe when it's all said and done for this trilogy, they'll have her ride off into the twin sunsets, if you will, instead of killing her off. Perhaps that's the more respectful thing to do here. Maybe we'll never know her final fate, or just have her death referenced at some point in the next saga trilogy, which could take place in the far future of the Star Wars timeline. And I know some have replied to previous videos of mine that have broached this topic and said that she's too big of a character to die off screen, but maybe a peaceful off-screen old age death is what's best for Carrie's beloved character. And if Leia does survive this trilogy, maybe they'd be more willing to kill off Luke. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not eager to see Luke die, but if done right, it can and likely will be the most powerful moment in all of Star Wars thus far. And I don't just mean for me and other fans of the character, but for any fan who loves and appreciates this saga. Because the original trilogy was really Luke's story, or his hero's journey from a dreamer on a desert planet to a knight who saved his father and helped defeat the greatest of evils to save the galaxy. And although the prequels altered Star Wars to be more of the story of the Skywalker family, and the sequel trilogy is now further expanding upon that story, at its core, at least for me, it is still Luke's story. And if that story is going to be passed on, he needs to have a very fitting and emotional death. And I don't just mean emotional for us, the audience, but for the characters in the movie. His death, assuming it does happen, should be the turning point of this whole trilogy. That moment when one of our main characters, likely Rey or Kylo Ren or even both, ultimately choose their final path and embrace their destiny for good or ill. And I think there's only really a handful of ways that's done. First, Luke could be defeated and killed by Kylo Ren, which I find highly unlikely. Will these two have a duel at some point? Sure, I'd be surprised and disappointed if they don't. But if Kylo Ren outright wins that encounter, I, and likely others, are going to have an issue with that. Because it'll be hard to believe that Kylo Ren lost to Rey, and then went on to defeat Luke. And that's nothing against Rey, and I'm not trying to dig up the debate about if she really should have won and defeated him in The Force Awakens. But unless we somehow see that Kylo Ren has become insanely powerful at some point in this trilogy, I don't think he should have a chance in hell against Luke in a fair fight. Of course, he could also trick and then kill Luke, similar to what he did to Han, though if you believe J.J. Abrams, Kylo wasn't trying to trick Han on that bridge. He actually hadn't decided what he was going to do until he actually did it. Either way, I don't see them going with Kylo stabbing Luke in the back at some point, or as he did with Han, in the front. Not to mention, that'd be a horrible way to end Luke, and I'm not saying it was a horrible way for them to kill off Han. I do think it, for the most part, worked for the character and what they were likely going for with that scene. Also, as the book implies, as does his subsequent loss to Rey, it didn't exactly make Kylo Ren stronger with the dark side, as he no doubt expected it to. Another way Luke could conceivably die is to be killed by Rey, which might sound ridiculous right now, but we really have no clue how the story between these two will play out. But if Rey went dark side and ended up killing Luke, who maybe refused to fight her and, like with his father, put all his faith in her, only to have it backfire, well, that'd pretty much make her my second favorite character of all time, right behind Luke, who she had to kill to earn that spot. And that'd be because doing something like that, and granted, I'm saying this without knowing the context of why and how it would exactly happen, would show that Lucasfilm and Disney were willing to not only push the boundaries of what I think they'll do with Star Wars, but knock them down entirely. Because having Rey go dark side alone, when so many are already crying about her being Disney's new princess, would be great in itself. but then to have her be the one who kills Luke, and maybe as a betrayal of Luke's faith instead of just defeating him, would be the cherry on top for me. One of the problems with it, however, is it would heavily mirror what we already saw in episode 7 with Kylo almost doing the exact same thing to the trusting Han. But what could be interesting about it is if seeing this is what actually brings Kylo Ren back to the light. Then again, I really don't know if Disney and Lucasfilm have it in them to basically turn Rey into the villain of this trilogy. But again, if you want to do a twist that no one would ever expect out of them, then look no further than Darkseid Rey killing Luke. Another possibility for Luke's end is to be defeated by Snoke, or to be defeated by Snoke and Kylo Ren because, for one reason or another, Rey wasn't there or refused to fight with him. His death then encourages Rey to then be the one who ultimately defeats both Snoke and Kylo, but the big problem with that, of course, is that if Luke couldn't beat them both, how could Rey? That not only seems unlikely, but will also likely anger some fans. In fact, Luke losing to anyone is likely going to anger fans, especially if someone then goes on to defeat the one who killed him. Which, in a sense, brings us to why I think Luke will die in this trilogy and how exactly it'll happen. Because I think we can all agree that Luke is likely going to be very powerful. In fact, George Lucas, who of course doesn't exactly have a say anymore, said Luke would go on to become the most powerful Jedi ever. So again, if he loses to Snoke, how would we expect Rey to defeat the one who had killed the most powerful Jedi ever? Well, most likely Rey will defeat him with the help of Kylo Ren. But how do we get these two together in a believable way? Well, I do think that Kylo Ren is going to be fascinated with Rey after losing to her in The Force Awakens, and that fascination either becomes an obsession and drives him further to the dark side, or becomes his salvation and is one of the keys to bringing him back to the light. The other key to bringing Kylo back to the light will of course be Luke, who may know that he cannot defeat Snoke, but that Kylo Ren and Rey together can. And maybe the reason Luke cannot defeat Snoke is because he is afraid of what he has to do to defeat him. It's not so much that he's not powerful enough, but rather that he's afraid of what that power will do if he embraces it, and what he might become if he uses it all. So Luke sees his best option being to, in some fashion, sacrifice himself and once again put his faith in his family, or in this case, in his nephew Ben and in Rey. And I'm not sure there could be a more fitting end for Luke than to again put all his faith in his family and friends, which of course the Emperor once told him was his greatest weakness, but has always been his greatest strength. And if Luke does sacrifice himself, he doesn't have to lose to somebody that others will eventually go on to defeat, and then at the end of episode 9, he shows up with the rest of the Force Ghost gang, and everybody's happy. And of course, there is a chance that Luke does survive this whole trilogy, but then the question becomes, just when and where do you kill Luke? As I said earlier, people don't like the idea of Leia dying off screen, so Luke dying off screen likely won't sit well with them either. And of all the deaths in Star Wars, his needs to have a great deal of purpose. It needs to be a catalyst for a great change in the life of one of our new main characters. I truly feel it has to be one of, if not the, most significant moments in all of Star Wars. And if you don't do it in this trilogy, do you do it in the next one, which is who knows how far off, if it'll ever come. And by then, will you have missed your window to have it be a true and huge impact on the story? Because The Last Jedi and likely Episode 9 are very much going to still be Luke's story. And if you do another trilogy down the road, I don't see you making it about Luke again. So I truly feel this trilogy is the time and place to kill off Luke. And that, again, is coming from a huge fan of this character who doesn't exactly want to see him die, but does know it has to happen, and wants the character to get the fitting and significant end he deserves. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now is your turn to let me know what you think. Does Luke die in this new trilogy, or does he make it through? And if he does die, how does it happen? Let me know in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.